We are live. Good evening and welcome to the Transfer Show. It is myself and it is Dave Davis. And Dave has got a bag full of tricks for you this evening. I've rarely been as giddy ahead of a show with this man here because we've rarely had as many stories which contain potential for change up and happiness and smiley faces left, right, and center. Now, they are stories. Don't be getting excited, but they are stories which we haven't had for many, many times in the past when we've been rocking through this podcast and focusing on how Chelsea are getting on and everyone else who's doing things. There are at least, Dave, so many links in and around the Liverpool sort of universe. And the thing that seems to be the catalyst is this latest news about Trent, which is where we're going to start. But before we do, man, are you giddy also?
I actually don't know what's happened in the last sort of 48 hours. About like when the Trent news broke, like we knew it was coming, let's be honest, but we were quite like on the back of two defeats, the international break and this, you were like, where's this all going? And then, as you know, we got some bits of info and we started screenshotting each other and we just became that like Vince McMahon meme, like one contract story. Yeah, like one transfer story, like 3 transfer, and it just like we were literally even today just firing stuff, and we are like, nothing's definite, as you said. You never know 100%, but it just feels like someone somewhere has like that meme just prodded Liverpool with that stick and said, "Do something," and someone's gone, "Ah, shit, Trent's leaving. We best do something, aren't we? Yeah, go on then, right? And off we go," type of thing, and it just feels like giddiness, we're off to the races type of thing. I'm genuinely excited for this one.
I am too, and I'm loving the idea of multiple changes around the club. I'm loving the idea of the potential positive news around people remaining on the back of this Trent news as well, because it does seem to be a catalyst for a lot in that regard. And maybe it is as simple as it has now made a clear financial picture for those people who are pulling strings in that regard when it comes to contracts, when it comes to making moves for other players, because a lot of those stories are starting to firm up as well. Yeah. We're hearing very definite rumors about very definite players, which is all very, very exciting. So let's start with the Trent stuff. Now, most people will be very familiar with it at this stage. They'll all have their own takes. You and I are not ever going to be in the sort of top red or bottom red category. We don't seem to fit. We seem to be citizens of no nation when it comes to the Liverpool fan base. We're certainly not going to be out there, burning jerseys. And similarly, we're not going to be saying, "Oh, fair play to Trent and let him go out." I for one will be clapping him as he goes. So I think we're in that middle ground where we're a little bit pissed off. I think that's the rational way to be, a bit justifiably annoyed with the way that it's been done. There are ways of doing things, Dave, and this did not feel like one of the best ways that this could have been done and handled. Talk to us about what we know, because a lot of people are still, I noticed, using qualifiers like "if" and "it seems" and so on. To me now, this story that we all felt was likely to happen is now absolutely definite in my mind. There's way too much out there for it to be anything else. And I'm not relying purely on the old Pornstein angles. It just feels like now it's been broke. The news is out there and we are all being sort of allowed to deal with it. And it's a problematic procedure, Dave. Talk to us about what we know.
Well, what we know is pretty much any major journal, like you said, it's not just like David Ornstein, Paul Joyce has wrote about it, that they've all wrote about it. It's out in the world of football, isn't it? That Trent Alexander-Arnold has pretty much agreed a deal with Real Madrid. Now, honestly, like you said, the fact people say if, well, this is 99.9% done unless his biro breaks on the day. That's the only thing that stops this happening, really, isn't it, in that regard? And there's already journos doing articles on Real Madrid are asking to get him early, Trev, aren't they? Because they want him for the Club World Cup. Like, I don't really know why anyone's filing it under any type of if. And I know people are putting there in the chat panel about Romano told us about this last March. We've said it before. Other AI contributors have used that phrase, Trent McManaman. This has been going round since like Jan 2024, hasn't it? It's been well sort of led to. And you start looking back at things, don't you, Trevor, as we've talked about, and the fact he only signed a 4-year renewal, which seemed a bit strange, and now you're thinking, did he envisage this? Was this always the plan all along? What would happen? What would occur? And like you said, there's just a bit of a taste, and I did it on a show the other day, I can't remember who, but said, do you remember when he did that celebration and did that little thing in his ear? Was it, I think, West? And now you start looking and thinking, yeah, that doesn't look too smart now, does it, all of a sudden? And yeah, it's, unless you're living under a rock or you just want to deny like everything, then Trent Alexander-Arnold is set to become a Real Madrid player. So, you know what? He's done brilliant and all that. Everyone's got a right to an opinion. But like the transfer show, we're maybe giddy about what it could mean coming up.
That's exactly what it means to me right now, because having sort of put it to bed in my mind that it was highly likely it would happen, it was just a blessed relief. The minute I saw your tweet about, for the love of God, just confirm it to the club, that's exactly where I was mentally as well. Can we just get that like absolutely nailed down, so now we can start to think about what that might mean? And it seems, without it having been made official, that that's exactly where we are, because these stories are starting to circulate now with great vigor. But just before we move into them, and that is the exciting part of the show, nobody wants to think about a lad who had made himself the greatest player in his position in world football leaving the club. No one wants to talk about or think about the angle of, the lad you saw the videos all today, all these interviews with Trent talking about how he's a local lad, he wants to play the rest of his career there. Something happened. We don't know what that is. It could be as simple as ambition. It could be PlayStation brain. It could be any number of things that happened in his own personal life that made him want to make a change. We don't know that. And all we can go on is the lad's words. They were absent, Dave. There was nothing being said by Trent Alexander-Arnold about wanting to stay and captain this club in the real times when it mattered, when this contract was really becoming an issue. So you can understand, can't you, that an awful lot of people have this cynical view that, well, it was a long-term plan and that any of the things that were being said were guff. I think that's probably harsh, but I do get it. It's hard. It's easy to understand why people have seen this as a strategy, that it was only a 4-year contract that was signed, that he'd be getting out at 26, which is, again, sort of just that little bit subprime in terms of years, even though it's not really when you've played as much as Trent has. I mean, what do you make about it? Do you see a cynicism in the way that this was approached, or do you think it was a sort of a confluence of things? The end of the Jurgen period, the change up in the backroom staff that happened for a couple of years there and sort of set things back and changed the way that we were doing business. How do you see it? Like, what do you attribute this to?
People love it when it's simple, don't they? And it's just like, it's his fault, it's binary, it's this, that's it type of, and I get some people that have seen that. And ultimately, it's Trent that makes the decision. He needs to own that one way or another, however you react. Ultimately, the overall majority, and I want to use that word, majority of the responsibility sits at his door. And silence tends to come in two forms, doesn't it? It tends to come in like, there's a dignified silence where you keep your counsel, you keep your peace, there's a dignity to it and a reason to do it. Silence also comes in like a guilty, when you don't want to say anything because you know as soon as you open your mouth, you're going to incriminate yourself further. And I'm leaning towards the second one. I think that's why there's been a lot of silence since we've got, the information we have and talked about it. So there is that. And ultimately, people will talk about his brother and his role as the agent, but Trent decides ultimately yes or no. He's a grown man, so that's where it comes down to. But you're 100% right to mention the other bits, because like Jurgen Klopp, I adore Jurgen Klopp. He's one of my heroes, deserves a statue at Anfield. What he's given us those years, brilliant. But he almost brought in a structure, didn't he, with Schmacker, his mate, as a non-sporting director. Contracts were allowed to run down. And there's a bit there where you say FSG, however form you want to deal with that, past and present. They let it get to this stage as well, didn't they? Where 3 of the stars have got a year left to go. And the whole point, I think, of the reset that we've talked about is we need to get back to smart business. So everyone plays a part in getting to this stage. But ultimately, when it comes down to brass tacks, Trent Alexander-Arnold chooses to make that decision. And this may sound a bit like cynical, bitter. I don't know what the phrase is, Trev. I don't want him to just be able to almost skulk away quietly. It feels like somehow he should be made to own this decision. Like, you've made this call, own it. Don't think you're going to get away all smiles and happiness and all that. You're not going to ruin our title parade and all that type of thing. But I am intrigued to see how the club do eventually, when eventually they communicate this.
Yeah, I mean, this period of the season that's coming up that everybody's taking for absolute granted, and me as a natural pessimist refuses to do so. But I do understand that people are optimistic about our chances of getting this title over the line. We have a lot of great footballers, and all they have to do is show up in 5 or 6 games and the job is done. But I do understand an awful lot of people are starting to think about that and what it might mean. I think it'll be handled with just quiet dignity. I think he'll be part of the celebrations. He'll do a few claps. He'll get a few claps. There'll be a few raucous people in the ground that'll boo him. Very few, probably. That'll be mostly online, the jersey burning numpties. And I think that's how it'll go. I think it'll be with a whimper rather than a bang. He should be heading away, if he's going to head away, as a hero, having done something amazing. And he's, I think, partially, if you'll pardon my friends, fucked it for himself. So that's just how it's going to be. But the great news is that we have a positive angle out of this because, well, at least according to our pal Ornstein, it's talking now about how this means there's a good chance that the contract situation for the other 2 guys, who I think you and I are on the record as saying that we'd have preferred to keep, right, are now more possible. There's all sorts of tweets, whether you believe them or not, from all sorts of sources saying that the Salah deal is closer than it had been, that the Van Dijk deal, to a lesser extent, I'm seeing them, is closer than it had been. We are seeing these things, Dave, and they are coming from sources which people can put any level of credence they want into. But will you walk folks through that? Because again, it's not given to everybody to be online all day and keeping an eye on stuff. So for the benefit of people who are not seeing those things and where they're coming from, this knock-on effect now on the contract talks, where are we going with that?
Yeah. And even today, that there's, as we said, we've been tweeting and messaging or sending things to each other recently. But for those that missed it, David Ornstein earlier today did a Q&A for The Athletic, and no shock, was asked about Mo Salah and Virgil van Dijk and their deals. And no change, but maybe the phraseology comes in. As he replied, as mentioned in previous weeks and months, Liverpool are optimistic both will renew their contracts, and it's just a matter of time. Until it's done, we can't say for certain. It would appear there's work still to do, but there's nothing to suggest Liverpool's confidence has changed on these 2. So that's still, that's an updated as we've got today about an hour or so ago. So that's important to say. Then, Trev, God bless Egypt, because there's a story that comes out from Egypt from various sources. I'll probably butcher the pronunciations, but Mazraoui, an Egyptian source, an outlet there, says that almost the breaking news comes out. And as you say, people are like, that's wrong, that's false, because apparently Gary 46, a carpenter from Somerset, is updated with all the news in Egypt. But hey ho, that's how it works. And they say, Salah, because of the Trent situation, that money is available and that is moving closer. Then, and we've got him on the screen for those that can't see it, Ismail Mahmoud, probably the biggest name in Egyptian football, does clarify that it's a very reliable source. It says it makes a lot of sense, and his info is that Mo will continue. And actually, just from the bits when we're trying to dig around at the same time on Mo, is maybe not direct news on it, but this gives me heart, Trev, as I told you just before we went live. All the sources we're reaching out to say, these 2 guys, Mazraoui and Ismail Mahmoud, these have interviewed Salah a number of times. They know his camp well. That doesn't mean 100%, but it doesn't delete from the credibility, does it? Let's be completely clear on that. So there's a bit of a warmth, hopefully, and something's moving forward with Mo Salah in that regard. You had the update, as you said, from Ornstein on Virgil van Dijk. And again, dependent on which sources you want to believe or what credence you stake in them, there's even stories in the last couple of hours about Conor Bradley being closer to his renewal. Remember, we mentioned him last week and how his agent was just waiting to see, quite smartly, what was happening with Trent and how that would do for his figures as well. So there's nothing definite. There's nothing 100% confirmed. But let's be honest, from where we were about 24 hours ago, there's 3 good things there, isn't there?
It's incredibly positive, I think, because there are very few people who thought Trent was staying, or very few people who've been paying attention to the evidence that thought Trent was staying. If they thought Virgil and Mo were staying, there was evidence. You could see it in things that they were saying. You could sense it from their frustration about the contracts not being done. That in and of itself implied that they wanted to be around. There was nothing from the other fella. So I think most people were feeling the fact that that was going to be a done deal. Now, having had everything taken away from us in terms of, possibly our 3 most sort of marketable and attractive assets in terms of just being the best at what they do. Now we have hope on the big 2. And they are the big 2. It's like, don't get it twisted in your head. People can get all bent out of shape about what Trent is and what he is and what he represents and all the rest of it. He is a very, very good player, a guy who could have gone down as the greatest to ever play right back for the club if he had hung around. I think that may be gone from him now. It will be, of course, for some people. He'll be a feature, and he was absolutely in there for me. But I think now this will possibly change things. But to have hope around Van Dijk staying, who has seasons left in him, to have hope around Salah, who is so ridiculously productive this season that it makes no sense to have anything other than clamps into that lad and keeping him at Anfield. These are great things, Dave. But we have further news as well. And again, they are rumors, but it's good to see those rumors as opposed to the ones that we're fielding day in, day out, which are all negative and no hope. And it looks like it's not happening and blah, blah, blah. There are other stories of ins and outs. The exciting links have started to happen. We have links with defenders. We have links with attackers. And there are also links with lads heading the other way, Dave, to sort of balance the books. 3 lads who have been tied up together in a story are Quansah, Joe Gomez, and Isak at Newcastle. And you and I have been saying for ages, that's fanciful nonsense. That's not going to happen. He's too expensive, blah, blah, blah. If there is a real desire from the player, and if there's a desire from Newcastle to do some squad adjustment, and if Newcastle don't get Champions League, and so on and so forth, who knows? Who knows? But this story is back with a bang today. Walk us through it.
This is now that, it's been that Jim Carrey meme, hasn't it? You know, the one that says, so you're saying there's a chance. And we've always just held that kind of faint hope almost. And this doesn't necessarily mean it's stronger, as you said, but this just doesn't go away at all. And this is, we need to be clear on this, people. There's respect to journalists like David Ornstein and others saying that their info is Liverpool are in or looking specifically at Alexander Isak and doing a deal. And as we said on the last one, from digging around as much as we can, that's our info, that he's a serious target for Liverpool. And this kind of comes up yesterday a little bit from Talk Sport via Alex Crook, doesn't it? About him being a key target and willing to include Jarell Quansah and Joe Gomez. And I remember when I saw that yesterday, I was like, lazy journalism, Trev, this is like the Gordon story from last summer, just rehashed a little bit. And whatever type of thing. It's just easy to play on. But as you know, I sent you that screenshot to say, I'm being told there's something in this from someone we both know is very reliable. And then late last night, the Times comes out with their story saying Jarell Quansah is a serious target for Newcastle this summer. Joe Gomez was going to be part of the deal for Alexander Isak. Now, this does absolutely not mean it's going to be done. And people are going to say this is 2-2 and getting 28 type of thing. I understand all that. But our info is this, this is not going away. And this is a serious thing for Liverpool. And digging further, Trev, as we've really tried to get something on this, Michael Edwards, that name is going to come up a few times because Michael Edwards is handling sales for Liverpool Football Club at the moment. And Michael Edwards, from our info, has been talking to Paul Mitchell, who's the sporting director or whatever he's called there at Newcastle. Does this mean definitely it's going to happen? We are not saying that for 1 second. But in terms of the excitement barometer, it has moved the needle a little bit. And this is not just pure dismissed, complete fanciful nonsense we maybe thought it might be. It's really starting to feel there's something to this. And yes, Newcastle have probably got to miss out on the Champions League. Yes, departures, all those things and those hurdles have got to be overcome. But I am at the stage now, would I simply dismiss this? No. Do I think it's likely? I've not flipped to a yes on that either, but it's right to be a little bit excited about this one.
I think it is, and it's even if it's only a reaction to this time last week where there were very strong, well, the week before, where there were very strong links to PSG for both Virgil and Ibu Konate, and it just felt as if the whole thing was coming apart if you were to believe the rumors. And of course, this is where we live, in the sort of hinterland between believing these things, reading the stories, and trying to have some sort of a common sense outlook. And we don't make these strong pronouncements either way. They belong in the comments section, which is great to see. And you work your way through the comments section and go as wild as you like in there, lads. There is a very strong statement there from Vernicio, who says getting rid of Quanta would be nuts. And listen, I get that. That makes a lot of sense to me. He's a young kid. He looks like he's really got a lot going for him. But if you have a situation now where we're looking like we're going to be able to keep Virgil van Dijk around, and Joe Gomez is a saleable asset as well, and we really want to change our attack, maybe this is one of the levers that gets pulled. Listen. These are above our pay grade. We just talk about what we see and what we hear. And this is very interesting. And I think an awful lot of people, whether it's lunacy, as our commenter says, or whether it's actually canny business sense because we've got a few other things lined up and we have a young up-and-comer in the centre-half brigade who will be signing, who knows? But it's bloody exciting, Dave, to think about someone of the calibre of Isak coming to the club. Fanciful or not, the stories don't stop, though, man. The stories don't stop, and I'm really glad you mentioned the thing about the Edwards involvement and what that might mean in terms of sales and the connection with Mitchell at Newcastle. But one of the areas that we've been talking about all the time, and it's right back to the start of the show now, is fullback. Because clearly now we are going to have to replace Trent. I think I'm going to start talking now as if that's done deal. Just so, like, if that offends you and you're listening to the show or you're watching the show, I apologize in advance, but I'm going to talk about that as if it's a done deal, because I think it would be naive to think anything else at this point. So with that in mind, we are going to need a starting right back. I love what you mentioned about the Conor Bradley thing. Fair play to Conor Bradley's agent, as you said to me in a message earlier on. That's proper agent thing. They've got the club over a barrel. Now let's get whatever we can, milk whatever we can out of them. Fair play. It's good to see. And we all love Bradley. And we can all see the potential in Bradley. But Bradley's been available for about half of the time that he's been here. And that's an issue. So we are going to need a right back. And to listen to the received wisdom, Dave, from all people, we are going to need a left back. Unless you're a Robbo super fan and you can't see any fall off in his game at all, you're going to need someone on either side. The Kirkez story won't go away. There's a Fernandez story that's really, really interesting. And again, I think it was young Maguire who was floating this one. Walk us through the fullback stuff, because this is really interesting.
Yeah, the Kirkes name, it almost feels like the hottest one, doesn't it? Of all the links, the one who comes up the most, the one that feels most solid from what we've heard. And yeah, genuinely, like all the info, all the journalists we spoke to have said that's the one. I mean, we did David Lynch Media Matters. He said his info is that's the strongest one of any signing he could say at the moment. That Liverpool have got the framework there. And digging a little bit more again on this, because we're always trying to get info as everyone else is, Trev, that there's been talk that Queeve and Kelleher could be included in that deal, which a keeper with a year left to go, who we all love Kelleher, but clearly wants to go and be a number one somewhere. It makes all the sense. If you could do a deal where Kelleher went with money for Kirkes, it's smart business for me. That feels like, yeah, Edwards doing back in the groove, good sales, smart business. So that's the first one. The second one, God damn that bloody Sam Maguire, the big-headed, I'll not insert my adjective there, but he called this player and, yeah, he profiled him and a lot of people went, who was it, etc. And I'll be honest, when I first, it was like, who the hell is Martin Fernandez? And then you did a bit of digging, you did a bit of research, and I just literally did a show about an hour and a half ago with Bart from Up on Transfer Market Metrics where he ran his profile, Trev. Be excited. If Connor Bradley deals in about 1,500 minutes a season, about half a Trent, this boy could really be the one to be the next one. And actually, from asking around, we'll come to a bit of this, but there's a lot of connections there with Porto especially. But in terms of profile, which people want to know, quick, good at assists, sort of line to line, good all-round player, but also good mixed passing. And by the way, I'm not saying he's Trent, but the kid can ping a ball. And yes, people will say small sample size. I get all that type of thing. However, the Porto angle, we've got a brilliant relationship with Porto. When we signed Luis Diaz and the way we structured that deal, because Porto have had financial issues, so we helped pay off some of their debt, worked well with them. We know Julian Ward, fluent in Portuguese, big navigator there of the Portuguese market. There's just a lot of things standing up for this kid this season. So, yeah, in terms of fullback developments, nothing's ever definite, like you say, but I'm at the stage where it's right to be excited for the Kirkes link. And I'm at the stage where, now that we've ran his profile and looked at him, at first I was like, who is Martin Fernandez? And now, Trev, who is Martin Fernandez, by the way? So, yeah, I'm excited by this one.
Can I ask you, just to round out the little summary you've given there, it's a small sample size, I take it, because he's very young still. Is he?
Yeah.
What age is Fernandez?
19.
19. Well, that will explain why he can't spell his name properly yet, I guess. He's putting an M there at the end of his name. Silly boy. So that's a really interesting one. I love this. I love this story. I love the story around Kirkes because people are wild excited about Kirkes. Even though a fella you and I work with, young Hendrik, isn't quite as excited about Kirkes as other people are. And as Dave rightly points out on his show, and has done regularly recently, I guess very much depends on what the balance is between the two fullbacks, because it does look like we're going to be signing a pair of starters. Or is that a bit much? Do you think it's going to be Robbo and a new starter? Do you think that's the likely thing next season? Because we know that, it's going to be whatever we can manage to raise in sales plus a paltry amount that will go to the actual transfer fees. Does it seem a little bit unlikely that we're going to get a baller in at both full-back positions to start for the new season? Because that would be a big ask, you'd imagine.
Yeah, I kind of get the impression that one will be a starter, definitely, but I think you're leaning more towards the left. I mean, Kirkes is the hottest name, and you're thinking if he's coming in with that money they're talking, he's going to start realistically, and Robbo, you'd think, becomes the alternate, or his minutes reduce, if you want to phrase it that way. The way from it was put to us around Fernandez was, good old Martin, funny spelling name, is that they're talking around the 25 million quid mark, which screams all the hallmarks of, yes, it's quite high because of the potential, but the way they balanced it is he's looking at the moment at about 1,500 minutes for his season. So if you add his minutes with Connor Bradley, you kind of get a full Trent, if that makes sense. So it's almost more he could be an alternate, but with Bradley in that situation. And I love Connor Bradley, but it's right to have concerns over those injuries and those hammies already, isn't it? So it feels like it's an alternate. So I think your left back, and if it's Hato, the other one from Ajax, yes, he's younger, but you feel they will have a more senior position, shall we say, than the right fullback, unless as the other names come in, it is Jermaine Frimpong, which would mean we're not going to defend at right back or on the right side all of a sudden, which will be fascinating to see. But that may just change the lineup. But yeah, I reckon it's one starter for either side, not for both.
You mentioned something that we should just flesh out a little bit there in the breakdown that you were given about the connection with Porto. It was kind of a throwaway comment. Just to go back to that, what is that and who is that, the connection?
Julian Ward, that used to be one of his previous roles, didn't he? An analyst within the Portuguese market. That is his speciality. Edwards is well connected in that area at the same time as well. We've also got a great relationship with Porto going back a number of years, even when Marco Grujic went there, but also when we bought Luis Diaz, we structured a deal really nicely for them to have a good relationship as well. I think we paid off a bit of their debt was the info we were given, because they were struggling a bit of their time, and helped with favourable payment terms, as they called it. So we have got really good connections for that club and that market. So do you know what? If you have them, leverage them.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Lean into every little advantage. We've already kind of talked about the likelihood of the possibility of Virgil extending. Ibu Konate's deal is, again, one of those ones that needs to get sorted, although not as urgently. And the rumors of him heading off to PSG will not go away either. He hasn't done a whole lot to quash them either, to be honest. And we know that's kind of his team. But let's be optimistic and say we keep the two best centre-backs in the league together next season. If the boys go that we've talked about earlier on, or even if just Joe Gomez or Kwanzaa goes singular, we are going to need to get some recruitment in there, because it's getting a bit thin in that particular area. And we've been linked with a couple of big names, one that we've heard a million times before, well, certainly over the last two windows. Yeah. And one that's a kind of a newbie because he's an up-and-comer, very highly rated youngster. In terms of recruitment for the Reds in the centre-half department, what are the stories that people have been hearing and that are doing the rounds at the moment?
Yeah, a couple of names. And I got excited with these when I was sending the screenshots and the detail to you last night, Trev. So I think if you can see it on screen, people will know Dean Huijsen, won't they? The now Spanish international, young centre-back at Bournemouth with a left foot, tall, maybe not the best aerial win rate, but a lot of people like this kid, don't they? And 50 million release clause, club's well briefed on it. Yeah, Liverpool are absolutely aware of that. And as we said last week, and all the info we're still getting is they are very aware. People say monitoring aware. However, give me an adjective you want, but Liverpool like this kid. You never know for definite if they're going to move, but very much on the radar. So the only concern, as I think people keep noticing, is, we haven't had a new dad in the mix since Papa Diaz. Well, Papa Huijsen's an interesting one, because Papa Huijsen on his social media retweets quite a bit of Little Dean's articles that link him to Real Madrid and Spanish clubs that way, which is quite interesting. But it's good to see someone following in Papa Diaz's footsteps. But I think it is important to note that Huijsen has said, idol Sergio Ramos, club he loves, Real Madrid. Does that mean he would turn down a move to Liverpool if Real Madrid weren't there? I think, that's a different thing. But it's just an important one to note there for the first name. The second name as well, and I don't know, maybe this is a little bit linked to homegrown concerns, isn't it? Because people keep mentioning that. Have we got enough numbers, all these youngsters homegrown? The second name that, again, has really come up strong this week, Liverpool have asked again about Mark Guéhi, the Crystal Palace centre-back, the England international for the homegrown, etc. People will talk fee, but it's important to remember he has a year left to go on his deal. That doesn't mean they'll give him away for buttons, and Palace have got money from sales, but they'll also know if they don't get a fee for him now, they're not going to get a fee for him at all. So, yeah, really this week, interestingly, we had another, and this is not me trying to be like, oh, mysterious Meg, but as you know, Trev, we also got another name, which we won't say, depending on what happens with Van Dijk that way as well, but we obviously don't want to even float that. But just for the likes of Kwanzaa going, for the likes of Gomez going, the names that we have got, Dean Huijsen at Bournemouth, Mark Gay at Crystal Palace.
I'm just going to be a real prick here and say that the name that you're referring to there in the potential of Virgil going and us needing a high profile, it's a belter. But we can't say anything. So it is a fact. We don't ever throw out stuff that hasn't come from somewhere half decent. But that is it. There's stories aplenty out there. The Huijsen thing, I mean, Papa Huijsen, not sure about that. Also not sure about any lad whose hero is Sergio Ramos. Maybe we don't want him around. But the Mark Guehi thing's very interesting. I think Guehi will go, I was just checking his age there. He's going to turn 25 in July. Which is just about perfect. And the reason, one of the big reasons that people were against Mark Guehi before for Liverpool was that he's not a Klopp centre half. In other words, he's not a man mountain. We don't really know. Well, I don't really know what Arne Slot's preference in that regard is. I don't have enough sample size of him. I don't know about his previous teams in terms of the profile of centre-back height. So that could be, who knows? Who knows? Maybe Slot has a completely different notion about that player. And we do know that he'd be sort of plug and play. And he's very good Premier League quality. So who knows? Who knows? And I would imagine the young Spanish lad would cost a pretty penny. I can only see that as being big money. We have a couple more. This is brilliant. I mean, even what stage are we at with this show? We're like nearly 40 minutes in. And we're still talking about potential.
The first bit.
Dude, this is amazing. This is literally, we have not had a show like this for ages where there are that many possible links. And there's a couple left, and they're in the attacking sense. And I noticed that you haven't even written down in your notes something that we spoke about earlier on, and we spoke about just before the cameras went live on this one in our WhatsApp chat as well, which is the thing that could potentially cause some attacking incomings is the unrelenting links to both Saudi and, brace yourself, Barcelona for both Luis Diaz and, again, brace yourself, the tall Uruguayan lad. Who'd have thunk it? Now, I think most of us can see how there could be a big bag on the table for him to go to the Saudi League, and he could clean up there, and it might be a thing he wants to do for his family. It could also be a thing Luis Diaz wants to do for his family. But we saw, speaking of Papa Diaz, we saw how much he would love. And listen, these guys, they grow up, they've got Real and they've got Barcelona in their minds. That's it. They're the ultimate destinations. You can't blame people from that culture for thinking that. This is very interesting because, I can't see Barca forking out the money we want for Diaz or for Nunez. But maybe they would break the bank a little bit for Diaz if they thought it was the right profile, if they could move someone out the other way. What do you think in terms of that? What's going to be the trigger for incomings, and what incomings have you heard rumor? Because there's a name here I don't think a lot of people will have heard.
This is. I was going to sound like a CIA operative and use the word solid intel a second ago, but this is just like literally from everyone we're getting, Barca and Saudi seriously in for Luis Diaz. And in case you're thinking, where you get like. David Ornstein said this. Paul Joyce has mentioned it. We've said it before with like various journalists we've had on Media Matters. All the info we're getting is he's on again. It's that same Barca journal we talked to. Deco loves this player and wants him. Barca's problem, as Barca's problem always is finance. That is what it is. That's important to say. So we could debate that all along. If they don't have the finance, Liverpool put up or shut up. Liverpool will say that to them again. However, that second area, it's so important we mention this, and we'll kind of get to them again later on. But Michael Edwards, that man, on sales is handling the relationship, is our info with Saudi specifically, because we know how close Darwin Núñez came to ending up going to Saudi Arabia in the January window. That's been well mooted. Saudi clubs asked about Luis Diaz in January. That's also Ornstein. Others have said that. They are looking at him again. And it kind of feels like, you never know this for definite, Trev, but it would make sense to think almost the case of, he wants Barca. It's the club of his dreams. You get it. All those types of things. Absolutely. But if they can't find the money, I tell you what, forget all the other issues around it. Imagine if Saudi gave us a whopping great payment for Núñez and for Diaz this summer. I bet Michael Edwards and his chaps would be rubbing their hands together, wouldn't they, for that? And genuinely, from all the sort of info or the digging we're getting, I am now at the stage, and this could be wrong, so I'll get shot down. I'm now going to be surprised if Núñez and Diaz are at the club next season.
I will myself, primarily because I think the relationship has soured with Núñez. Despite the love that fans have for him, I think, the relationships that matter may not be as strong. And I think Diaz has always had one eye on the exit door, if we're being perfectly honest. And I'm not questioning the guy's application, either of them. They're great lads, very fond of them. But I think you're right. I think both of those are the most saleable assets that we have in that front line, in terms of we could get big money for them. And if they were willing, especially to take the Saudi bag, that's going to leave our boys in a lovely, lovely position when it comes to recruitment. Although, of course, it's big money we're going to have to spend out as well. Just on this, before we leave it, loads of lads saying there, we'll do a swap. K-Mac there was saying we do a swap with Jules Koundé, who's highly rated and one of the players that I think a lot of us would love to see coming in to supplement our defence or to be a starter, perhaps. It depends again on the balance, doesn't it, between the fullbacks. But there's a name there that you mentioned in passing, and it's all over the comments, and we should just give a second to it before we finish with the Liverpool section, and that is Frimpong. Now, people got all excited with themselves about the Frimpong thing, saying, because they saw that video where he did a Scouse accent.
Yeah.
Like, okay, calm down. But there could be something to this, because there are a lot of stories now. Whether they originated with that and they've stayed originated with that, I think I've seen them from one or two more realistic sources. But it is a name that's going around a lot. For clarity, for people who don't know, people I know who watch a lot of football have said this guy's great going forward, that this guy is a super winger, that he's a super attacking full back. If you're playing a back three or whatever, it looks good to have him on the flank. He can do it. But that when it comes to the more defensive full back in a back four, that might not be the best fit for Frimpong, or might not be a fit at all. That's something I've heard. Just to address Frimpong briefly, because it is a name that's going around in this bundle. Have you heard anything there? Does there seem to be anything solid in that?
This almost confuses me a little bit, I have to be honest, because yes, heard it from asking around Liverpool, and there's a few reports, as people have put in the comments even tonight, that absolutely heard we've looked at him. As you said, when you think of the profile of Frimpong, for anyone who watches the Bundesliga, Leverkusen, a big club, we played them in the Champions League. They play a back three, so he's wing back on the right, isn't he? So primarily his job, bomb on, get forward. We did his profile on Transfer Market Metrics when we first got wind of it. And Bart's, he's analytical. It's Dr. Phil Barter. He's level-headed. He brings analysis. And he did the stats bit by bit. And he got to the first bit. And for a doctor who's mild and level-headed, I'll never forget the line. I can't do his Cockney accent, but fuck me, he can't defend, was an interesting description of the right back at the time, realistically. And like, just in case you're thinking that it's bias, I mean, his highest defensive metric was in like the 13th percentile, Trevor. Like, it literally is almost like his attacking in his middle are like a top-class right winger, and his defensive metrics, Andy Carroll's type of thing like that. It just, it's a completely different system. It's a completely different way, and almost just think about this, people. For me, if you bring in Frimpong and you've got Frimpong and Mo Salah, who's actually defending on the right hand side? Who's actually doing some? And by the way, people will go, "Oh, Szoboszlai." You will kill Szoboszlai asking him to do Mo Salah and Frimpong's defending. You will kill Konate, or he can shuffle across. You will destroy those two players. So I just can't see it. And for me, the only way that Frimpong makes any sort of sense is, for me, I don't want this to happen. If Salah went, I could understand that element in that regard. That I just, and people are putting there, aren't they, in the chat panel? He's got right winger written all over him. Does anyone want to change our right winger? Because if you do, you're absolutely insane. Let's be completely honest. So I hear the name, but I just can't get my head around it.
Yeah, I think to be fair, a lot of people are suggesting that Mo would move more central, but again, I don't know that is that going to work? Will that necessarily work? He does love that spot. He can manipulate that side of the pitch so well. He finds so much interesting space coming from that side. There was a comment earlier on. Apologies, I can't remember who it was who was saying that, with the trend thing, was way back at the start of the show. Well, at least poor old Konate will have a little bit of a break now, because he'll have someone hopefully who's a little bit more sort of locked into the defensive side of right back, and then we start talking about Frimpong. That's just going to break Ibu altogether. So yeah, interesting stuff. We need to get on, because we need to look at some other areas apart from Liverpool. But I don't really give a shit at this stage, because that was so exciting to be actually talking about our own club for a change. Let's, in the last 10 minutes. Go for it. Go for it.
Even this, a second Mo, and that is the title I'm going to give you for this one. We've done your centre backs, we've done your links. Mohamed Amora. This is one for the nerds. When I ran this, and we ran it a couple of hours ago with Bart. Literally, Bart's like an Austin Powers step. His glasses were steaming up. He had to wipe them down. He was that excited for this boy. This guy is a proper data signing, as in 18 goal contributions, 10 goals and assists in the Bundesliga for Wolfsburg, 12th in the table. So not a good Bundesliga team either, really struggling. This boy, our info was watched last night by the scouts. Guess who banged in a hat-trick for Algeria last night as well? Wow. So good recency bias, really firing, really seen as a star. In terms of speed, one of the fastest players in the Bundesliga, literally as well. Nippy can play striker or left wing. So plays 2/3 of his game this season as the 9, but also a third on the left wing as well. Our info is that the data boys especially are really having a look at this guy. And part of the reason, Trev, is they believe they can get him from Union Saint-Gilloise, a team we know well, that had big data as well, for about 25 million quid. Now, people will look at this, and this is what baffles me and you, I know, a little bit, because people will go, that's not sexy, that's stupid. We should be looking at Isaac, and we should be looking at Alvarez and only players, and Kuna of that caliber. How high were people when Michael Edwards and the data people came back last summer? They were like, it's getting back to it all. This is a database signing. So if you don't want to do these types of signing, why are you high on the likes of Michael Edwards and all the data boys coming back and gaining charge on that? It's one of those. I get it's not a sexy name. It's definitely not sexy in terms of Isaac and Alvarez. I get all that. But this is one that our info says Liverpool are having a serious look at this player. And we've talked about it. If Nunes and Diaz go, you probably, you had Chiesa, there's question marks over Jota and all things like that. It would not surprise you if there's more than one attacker comes in. And they can't all be Alvarez or Isaac Price level, can they? They can't all just be automatic, that one. So if you're into all the data stuff and Edwards and all those boys being back, why wouldn't this intrigue you?
So here's where I am with this. Because you introduced this dude to me, I went and looked at what he was all about. 24 years of age, will turn 25 in a couple of weeks' time in May.
We love that age.
We do. He is 5'6", which is very small indeed, but also maybe a little bit of a late bloomer too. I'm looking at his senior career. So you mentioned Union Saint-Gilloise, who, of course, Liverpool are familiar with. Previous to that, he had played 57 games for Lugano, in which he scored 14 goals. Yeah. He had 18 in 32 for Union. And his loan move for Wolfsburg, as you said, has been highly successful with 10 in 24. And that's not to mention the assists. He has 13 in 33 for Algeria. This is not a long shot. This is a player of ability. And if he's been earmarked in the same way that, let's say, Sadio Mane and Mo Salah were, I mean, I'm all for it. I think this is very exciting. And I do like the idea of someone who people won't see coming, if you know what I mean, who could fit in very nicely. So that's hugely exciting. I'm glad we have that one at the end. I can't believe I nearly stepped on it. I was so excited to get on with the rest of it and forgotten that is probably my favorite one of all of these. As you say, it's a nerd signing. And if we have them back and we're trusting them, like you say, let's trust them all the way and let's see if they can pull another rabbit out of a hat. Moving around the Premier League for the last few minutes, let's start with United, or let's not start with United. Let's start with a fella who's linked with United, and then let's talk about who United are looking to sign themselves, because I don't think people are going to believe either of these stories. Start off with Jadon Sancho, and then tell me who it is that United are kind of side-eyeing currently, because, like I say, there's a lot going on at that club, and I don't think people are going to quite believe it. So we start with the Sancho news. Things not going as well for that kid as he would have seen and envisaged a few years ago.
He looks so happy, doesn't he, in that Chelsea trip and everything like that. Except Sweeney Todd is not that happy with Jadon Sancho. And even for a player that cost around 80 million quid when he moved to Old Trafford or anything, Chelsea are going to try and get out of paying the 20 million quid for a homegrown player, an England international. That's how far this guy's stock has fallen, Trev. Like, literally a case of Chelsea are prepared to pay, a £5 million penalty clause to United just so they don't have to take him. Do you know what that's how I can't even think a more recent time of a trajectory going the wrong way of a career. Sweeney Todd will pay 5 million quid not to sign you. Like that is just absolutely insane. So that is just a staggering one that even now. And for United, we always have to bring a United story in. This one made me belly laugh. This was brilliant. Do you remember Nico Williams? Not the Bilbao winger, but the right back who we sold to Nottingham Forest for about 16 million quid a few years ago. He's only got about a year left to go on his Forest contract in the summer. And obviously, look how well Forest are doing. They're absolutely flying. Manchester United inquired about him for their right wing back position. Maybe should have thought that this was a player that's grown up at Anfield, come through the ranks, is a Liverpool fan. And I wish I'd heard the conversation, but I bet I could guess what his reply was to this. But yes, they inquired. Everyone suspects that he will renew with Forest, especially if they make the Champions League. Of course he would. But there's a lot of clubs watching him.
Can I jump in there and just say something that's sort of possibly a bit wild, but I saw it mentioned on Twitter yesterday around Nico Williams, someone highlighting how well he's doing, what a good player he's turned into. And They were sort of mooting him or touting him, sorry, as a potential to come back to the club. Now, I remember him being good, but I also remember thinking it was probably the right thing for the kid to move on.
Yeah.
And I haven't watched him as closely as other people will have watched him in his current club. He seems to always pull up trees for his country, and a lot of people are very, very impressed with his club performances this season as well. I mean, do you think there's any vague potential there, or would we have done anything clever with a buyback clause or anything like that for that kid? Do you think he warrants it? Just curious about your own opinion on Williams.
Yeah, it was one. If it is there, no one's got it, or no one knows that there is a buyback clause, if there is one at all. The thing about Nico Williams is, I think sometimes his skill set and a versatility can count against him, because he's played right back, right wing back, left wing back, even left wing at times for Wales, hasn't he? And you know, sometimes you can get those players who you see it, they're great, and they're the utility men, we used to call them back about 15 years ago, didn't they? The thing about utility men is they tend not to be good enough just to have one position or an expert in that position by nature. And I just think that I don't see it at all. I'm not saying it's impossible, and maybe it'd be funny almost, wouldn't it, if in a year left to go or there was something left. But based on what we're hearing for fullback and how he profiles, I am struggling to see it. But then again, he can defend, unlike Frimpong, so maybe that comes into the mix.
Who knows? Certainly worth watching. And just before we go to a sort of a, oh my God, they've done it again. Here's two lads we could have possibly got. Let's look at one more story in the Premier League, and that is Tyler Dibbling and the frankly bananas money that is being rumored that Southampton want for him. First of all, is that a rumor, or was that an actual label that was slapped on him on the back of inquiries? Because if it is, are they actually mental?
This is genuine. This is multiple journalists have written this and sourcing this like, yeah, this is genuine. Everyone knows Southampton. I think they might even be down officially. I don't know. But this is their star crown jewel potential, all this, etc. And this has all come from 14 Premier League clubs have inquired about Tyler Dibbling. And you can imagine how the call goes, like, and they're having the chat. So how much would you be wanting for him? 100 million. No, seriously, like 100. Come on, stop joking. No. Southampton have put a price tag of 100 million on this kid. Now, as we're snorting here, I think this kid's got real potential. And you can see there's a reason why 14 Premier League clubs and Tottenham and City and we have inquired about him. But at that price, Southampton, let's be clear, they're trying to drive up a bidding war, aren't they? They want everyone to just like bid up until they get a top fee. They know they're not going to get 100 million. They probably know they're not even going to get half. That would be good for them. And people have said in the chat panel, yeah, look at how they did it for Lavia, and I get that. But it's still quite funny to think with a straight face, someone said, Tyler Dibbling, 100 billion quid, isn't it?
I mean, like, you can't blame them. Maybe someone will be mental enough to pay something approaching that. Maybe, like you say, they'll get 50, 60, which would surely represent great money for them. Worth watching, see what happens there. When you think about the 100 million figure, only a couple of seasons ago, and how, you know, there was the Grealish and then Rice. And it was like, really, can we go? Is that not like almost vaguely immoral to go to that amount of money for a footballer? But at least these were players who were incredibly sought after. This is a kid. He may have all the potential in the world, but wow, it's an odd one. Now, Brighton are doing Brighton things, and Chelsea, who love a signing, are doing Chelsea things. Just tell us about this latest episode in. Here's Brighton doing what Liverpool really should be doing.
This was, when we asked about these names, these just came from nowhere. And I remember when I was told about the second one, I was like, I'll just say that again if I got that wrong. But two players who people will be, what or who, as I say them, and I'm probably going to butcher this guy's name, but Brighton have signed an 18-year-old Korean winger from Daejeon Hana, I think it's pronounced, the club. And it's Yoon Do-young, an 18-year-old. It's a typical Brighton style. Who is this kid? He'll probably be worth 80 million in a couple of years' time, isn't it? It's just one of them for peanuts. And just when I was messing around and like trying to sort of, God, where they got him, he'll be a star. Got the message back like, well, Liverpool wanted him. Like, sorry, say that again. Like, Liverpool inquired about this kid because they think he could be like a real potential one and star in the future. And I was like, how do Brighton do this? Because this is, if they actually recall all the forwards or attackers they've got like 14 on their books, Trev. It's just absolutely insane how they stockpile them. But they're the sharp operators, no two ways about it. And then for those that can't see the screen, we mentioned Chelsea. We mentioned them in a bit of a guffaw way. That name that Dario Asugo, I think it's pronounced, that they bought from Sporting Lisbon. This was one, and again, when we were asking about it the other week, got the set of Liverpool wanted him. It's like, sorry, what? Liverpool wanted him. Liverpool wanted him as the Gravenberch backup almost for next season, seriously, and had a look at this kid. Again, it's a big data one that a lot of stats are there, but Chelsea come in with their 8-year contracts and big money, don't they? And it all goes to pot realistically. And Sporting Lisbon aren't going to turn that down. But for those that can't see it, this is a key detail. He's been on loan at Las Palmas and he's wearing that kit. Who's gone to Las Palmas on loan this January? Stefan Bajcetic. And part of it, ladies and gents, was supposed to be around this transfer and building that deal specifically. However, Chelsea have come in with huge money. So, yeah, that was a bit when we're digging around. That's why it says on the screen we missed out on them. But Liverpool liked the young Korean winger who's gone to Brighton, and they liked Dario Sugo, who is now going to be a Chelsea player for the Club World Cup. And definitely ask me about that again in a second, Trev.
Can I just ask you one thing? When you hear that Liverpool like them, and do you not find it almost more annoying to hear that information and hear it confirmed, and then see Brighton just doing the Brighton thing and just taking a chance on these guys? Because it doesn't. Aren't we all just kind of slightly in awe of how they go about their business? Isn't their model sort of incredibly enviable? So if we're in that if we're swimming in the same pool, why don't we flex our muscles and get these guys, even if we have to pay a little bit more than Brighton would have paid for them? You see where I'm going with that? It's a bit frustrating, right?
I think it always goes back to Jurgen Klopp when he talked about FSG. Do you remember he said, like, they're cautious with their money, sometimes too cautious. It does feel a little bit like, I'm hoping you'll see a bit of that change. And even if you get moves like it would have been a Sugo or this Mohamed Amora, things like that, I do wish at times that, especially, and maybe we've just got PTSD from a window where we signed a keeper who didn't even come to us and a 10 million Italian international who was a crop. Maybe there's that. But it would be nice just to see a few of those where we just did it. It just came from nowhere. Bang.
Now, we just finished the show with a move across Europe, and we'll have a look at Saudi and a few things as well. But let's start with Bayern Munich. And I know you want to bring that World Cup reference, so pop it in wherever you want to before the end of the show. Bayern, I think, are something like 6 points clear at the top of the Bundesliga. And you and I, when we were looking at this first, we were thinking, if any company's going in there, you remember these chats, and we were saying, that's an absolute rat's nest of a place.
Yeah.
Just a viper pit. And from minute one, the sounds weren't great, and it looked like there were factions forming. But he's managed to do the bare minimum, which is to keep them top of the Bundesliga after the success of old Xabi Alonso's crew last year. So I suppose he's ticked that basic box. But apparently, there is quite a lot of squad shifting is going to happen over the course of this summer. Ins and outs. Walk us through the Bayern thing, because who knows what knock-on effect that might have, which might even take us in.
Yeah, people will look at this and go, that's not true. They've got all the renewals sorted and they're keeping that squad together. Let's just be clear. Musiala, massive wage increase, long-term deal. Let's just be clear. Alphonso Davies, who's now unfortunately got that bad injury, and just before it, signed a huge wage deal, a huge increase. Kimmich has signed a renewal. Neuer's gone for another year. Like, yes, it's retaining players, but their wage bill has obviously jumped, hasn't it? It's quite clear in the signing on fees and all that. So it has a knock-on effect. Bayern, and he's also on the screen for those that can't see it on social media, Leroy Sané, that seems a really hard one for them to do now as well, because he'd want a big, you can't just have all your players on massive wages. It doesn't work that way. And Bayern also, we know they put Harry Kane on big wages at the same time. They want to bring in another winger, is our info. So if you've seen your wage bill go through the roof and you still want to bring in another top winger or another top player, you've got to raise funds somehow. And I'm intrigued to see how they do this, because I suspect Sane will go on a free. No, I'd really struggle to see anything different. Kingsley Coman, probably they're hoping Saudi come in with a bundle of cash for them. But it does feel like a lot of people are suggesting Bayern Munich want to do big business still, and they would love to get Florian Wirtz, the Leverkusen boy, but that just seems too rich for the blood. But a club that has seen their wage bill shoot up massively by the end of this year, and it is fan-owned as well. We know the impact that fan ownership has there and all the people. Something just feels like it's going to give. And I am intrigued to see how do they balance the books. You just feel like that's going to be really one to keep an eye on this summer. Does anyone get sacrificed at Bayern?
Now, I would be remiss in my job if I didn't ask you about the absolutely bananas rumor that was going around. I just want to get a take on it. You just say yes or no. I'm literally asking you, would you? So Harry Kane, who will turn 32, am I right? He will turn 32 in July. Harry Kane was being touted as a potential for Liverpool's number 9. If you could, would you? Would it depend on club busting wages, that kind of stuff, or is it just one of the stupidest things you've ever heard in your life? Which is how I kind of initially thought of it.
We tried to be calm, we tried to be rational, but have a bit of fun on the show at times as well. If Harry Kane ends up at Liverpool, I don't want to say people aren't doing their job very well, but I would like to see a public execution of an FSG staff member. If that occurs, would be my assessment of that.
Fair enough. We should just leave it right there. Last story then is Barca and Saudi. The Diaz thing, we've mentioned it before, but it's kind of full circle. Let's wrap it up there because it kind of brings it back to Liverpool. I know there's at least one more thing you wanted to mention there. So I'm going to let you take us home, buddy, whichever way you want to do it for the last couple of minutes. We'll try and get out in an hour and 10.
This one, I mean, I've literally, this is one that even broke today, and this feels huge because we're talking about these players, Saudi, Nunes, Diaz, and when could it happen? It all links to the Club World Cup. And we've always told people, Trev, the Saudis want to make a splash again for the Club World Cup. They've got 2 teams in there. They want to look good, and they may even look at moving players around the Saudi teams to make it good for them. This came out today. It got voted on by the Premier League clubs. For those that can't see it, there is going to be 2 transfer windows this summer. 2 transfer windows, all to help Manchester City and Chelsea. But not just Manchester City and Chelsea, everyone can benefit. So we play Crystal Palace, I think, on the 26th of May, that Sunday, isn't it? The last game of the season.
Yep.
The transfer window opens 5 days later on the 1st of June. But transfer window number 1 opens on the 1st of June and closes on the 10th of June. So like a 10-day club 18 to 30 style break for football clubs that way. And then we have that good old break for a grand total of, yes, another 6 days, because on the 16th of June, it opens again all the way till the 1st of September. So the thing is, people are like, oh, this is just City and Chelsea. Well, this is going to have knock-on effects, Trev, because all the other clubs might be thinking, if they're in a bidding war or they know City and Chelsea are looking at the players they are, they've got to move all of a sudden, haven't they? Everything has been brought forward. So would it surprise you even if on the last day of the season, for instance, we win the league, Darwin Núñez does all the waves and stuff, and gets on a plane to Saudi 20 minutes later. Or like, this is just genuinely. Also, these clubs can be ready for the Club World Cup. So that's why we're mentioning Diaz and Nunes again for Saudis. But this really does change. Brilliant for us. It'll probably give us 1,000 more stories. But the season ends, and 5 days later, transfer window number 1 opens. Crazy.
What I love about it gives us 2 transfer deadline days, which means we can break out. We'll take it in turns. One of us can wear the nice backless number, and the other can wear the matching yellow tie. Tremendous stuff. 2 deadline days, in other words, a mini one and a full one. But look, we want this because on the back of the start of this show, apparently we're going to be doing some business for once. And it's very exciting. If there are 2 opportunities or 2 windows of opportunity for us to do it, let's take that. This has been great, Dave. We've gone long, but I think it was well worth it because there was lots to get through for once. It was all about Liverpool as well, which you've got to love. And we got right back there again in the end. So let's wrap it up with that and say goodbye to everyone. Thanks from myself. Thanks from Dave. This has been the Transfer Show. We'll be back with you soon.